Here's somebody saying that with the Dallas immersion over a month ago, I'm finding it very difficult to stay in touch with the real love that I caught a glimpse of. I'm not making the calls that I know I should be. I guess I'm here to be seen and loved again. Haley says, I couldn't agree more. Maria, somewhat typical feeling. I don't want to make real love calls. Like conference calls, not sure what that means. Don't always want to talk about my really boring stuff that I think over and over. Victim stuff. Just want to be enlightened and entertained by others. And what's being described there, that's really what separates the people who progress in real love and those that don't. That's the hardest thing is the simplest thing, and that is connecting with people. That list of people that we generated from the real love immersion is a lifeline. It's a life-changing list. I've lost track of the number of people who have a pretty good intellectual understanding of the principles of real love, but they don't then make the calls. I was talking to somebody earlier today who said, well, but, and this is a bright person, bright, intellectual, thinking, understands and says, but I keep sliding backward. Well, do you make the calls? Well, no, I guess I just don't see what difference they'd make. Really? Well, how could you unless you make them? She said, well, I guess I'm kind of nervous about making them. Exactly why you need to make them. We can't do this alone. It's not something that you can study and expect that it will change your life by simply running it through your head. It's not like learning algebra. We really have to learn, we have to feel love. Love is a power way more than it's a principle. Really very much like the difference between studying sunlight and experiencing the power of it. You just as well go out and read to the plants in the field how important sunlight is to them, and then deprive them of sunlight as to teach somebody about real love and have them not feel the power of it. They have to feel it, just like plants have to have sunlight. And I realize it's a little uncomfortable in the beginning. I'm not naturally a gregarious, reaching out and making contact with other people kind of person. I'm not. And years ago, I decided that I didn't want my life to stay the same. So I started making phone calls. And I made a lot of them. I mean, I called hundreds and hundreds of people. And I was calling people 2, 3, 4 times every day. Because that's how important it is. We have to make the loving contact with other people and feel their concern for us. And if we don't, those initial feelings will fade away. And if we make contact with people only when we're in a crisis, we'll never really catch up. We're always working from a position of being behind. We're always fixing a wound instead of getting healthier. So, yeah, I know it's a little uncomfortable in the beginning, but nothing could be as hard as lying, attacking, acting like victims, clinging, and running. There just isn't another way. So we have to make a commitment. We have to have a list sitting next to our phones of people that we can call in multiple time zones. Lots of people. Because if we have a list of 2 people we can call, the odds in any given day when we call those 2 people that somebody's going to be busy and that we won't be able to reach somebody are going to be very high. So we've really got to reach out and make contact with as many people as possible. So like Donna is suggesting here, there are 3 of you here who are talking about what does it take to find real love and a little bit nervous about making calls. What a great opportunity for the 2 of you to call each other. Perfect. This is your chance. Exchange your email addresses. Get together over the phone. When people really want their lives to be different, they do. I was talking to a couple, just days ago, and they were having trouble with their marriage. And I said, well, how serious are you about this? I mean, do you want to keep wallowing in a marriage that's terrible, or do you want to make a difference? And they said, well, we want to do something about it. And I said, well, then come on down and let's talk about it. And they lived a long way away, I don't know, whatever, 1,000 miles, or I don't know, long way. They said, well, it's a long way to go. I said, well, then you're not serious. They did. They came. So when something matters enough to you, you make it happen. And that's what we have to do with finding the love in our lives. John says there's, this is a little thing that happened. I think it's big. Today I received a call from someone whom I had told yesterday that I would bring a specific tool with me so that he could fix something. He asked me if I was bringing the tool, and I told him that I looked for it, but I had not found it. Who hasn't done that? After I hung up, I caught myself. It was a lie. I had not looked for it. I simply forgot. Later that afternoon, I told the person that I had lied. It's amazing how easily we automatically lie so we look good. I've been practicing real love for 6 months now. I can only think to myself that real love is a lifelong process. Is that true? Yeah. I learn more about real love every day. Anybody who persists in real love learns that. The more you see, the more you see. So, you think, well, gosh, if I just got rid of, if I were just to address those 5 flaws, well then, gosh, I'd have it made. And as soon as you begin to address those 5 flaws, you discover you have 12 more. And if you understand real love properly, you're not discouraged by it. It's just more opportunities to be happier. So yeah, it is a lifelong process. And most of the things that we do are so covered up by layers of dishonesty and fear and inertia and tradition. We have no idea we're doing them. Like I was talking to this couple that I just mentioned this last weekend, and holy smokes, I mean, they attacked each other with almost every breath they took. One of them would say, well, now, there's just something that I want to share. And of course, I'm sitting there thinking, this is not going to be a sharing. And sure enough, it would be a and she would attack him and say, well, and a few minutes later, he would share something and he would cut her head off. We do this stuff when we're empty and afraid. We lie when we're empty and afraid. We attack other people. We act like victims. It just never stops. And over a lifetime, we become more and more aware of it. We become more sensitive to it. We become more committed to doing something about it. You just get better at it. So, but it really takes some commitment in the beginning, because the beginning is the hardest. If you don't make those regular phone calls in the beginning and really do what it takes to start off with a really significant foundation of real love, you don't really ever get enough of a foundation to even build anything on. It's kind of like building a house on sand. If you don't get a big enough foundation of real love, concrete, you can build a house forever, building the walls and the windows and the tile and the ceiling and the curtains, and that no matter how much effort you put into all those things, the house will be constantly falling down, shifting, sliding, leaning, something, because your foundation is faulty. So in the beginning, we've got to work on the foundation, and we've got to really put some effort into it. Although ironically, the effort of telling the truth and finding real love is less effort than the effort of lying, attacking, and all that other stuff that we do. It seems harder only because it's less familiar. That's all. Really, it's just less familiar. The couple that I was talking to this weekend, and I don't remember details anymore. Either I'm getting old or I just don't care about them as much. I'm not sure which. Maybe it's both. But she was starting to attack him about something, and it was clear he had no idea how to respond to that. And so I just went over and sat next to her and put my arm around her and said, and put my face right up next to her face, and I said, oh, that's entirely my fault. I was not paying attention to you. I was not thinking. Instead, I was thinking only of myself. I'm going to try to pay more attention to that in the future. And she just melted. And I mean melted from a position of just, rigid antagonism. And he's watching this thinking, wow. And I said, and I'm nobody. I mean, here she was melting with me, and she didn't even know me. So imagine how this works when you receive that kind of openness and acceptance and love and listening from somebody that, you really want to learn to care about. But it's different, because he couldn't even have imagined doing that. We just need to learn bit by bit to practice doing that, usually first with strangers. It's way easier to love strangers in the beginning than it is the people that have inflicted wounds on us for a lifetime, which is why we have loving groups. Let's see, I want to make sure I didn't miss somebody here. Oh, here we are. Maria says, I know the calls make a difference. I like conference calls, but I'm still really goofy about one-on-one calls. Meetings are hard now because there's still a lot of unloving responses. Our one coach in Austin is great, but our other meetings struggle because they're facilitated not by coaches. This all sounds really unloving as I'm writing this, but a lot of people have come and gone, and some of us think that it's because the meetings are not very loving. Lots of fixing by those of us who are not trained, blah, blah, blah. I like conference calls because the coaches can be so good. Okay, so I'm going to send this even though I'm embarrassed by how ugly it all sounds. It's not ugly. You're just describing how things are. And in reading this, there's really no accusation or blaming here. Of course, I'm not hearing your voice, but I'm not feeling any blaming. I mean, you're just describing that people who are less experienced just don't do as good a job of loving, which is why we keep having conference calls, which is why we keep doing the web chat now, which is why we try to have the 2-day immersions from time to time, which is we try to make real love as available to people as possible, because in the end, if you're in a meeting, the person who's going to be responsible for making that meeting loving can only be you. I mean, you can go there and say, well, why doesn't somebody say something loving? Well, good luck. Somebody more loving than you may not be there. So the only way to really guarantee that we're going to have a loving experience is for us to go there with a sufficient desire and training. Some training is involved, and with the experience with loving people, that we can be the loving person. And you're right. I know that in a lot of meetings there's a lot of fixing going on. Why don't you do this? And blah, 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 blah. Ignore that. I mean, so when somebody speaks and you got a little fixer who blah, 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 and isn't loving at all, wait till they're done, and then ignore that they even spoke. Then turn to the person and say, now, are you feeling like you were heard? Or are you feeling loved? Do you feel like you need more? And keep talking to that person until they feel the love that they came to get. Don't correct the person who blew it with them. Waste of time. Just keep listening to them until they do feel loved. And that's all you can do. So it really doesn't matter if people screw up in a meeting. It matters what we do to love the people who are there. And all we can do is just get better and better. It's inevitable that there are going to be people there who haven't the slightest clue what they're doing. Can't change that. Let me know if that answered what you're talking about. John says, I've talked to my neighbor about real love several times. Last week I asked her if she wanted to watch the video. This one, I guess. No, maybe not. Your video. I get, or maybe he means the DVDs with me. Oh yeah, it is what he means. If I read further, I wouldn't have to ask. So we watched the first DVD. And I talked to her today where we scheduled time for tomorrow to watch the next CD, and she told me that she was excited about what she saw and that she invited another friend to come join us, if that is okay. I, of course, said that would be great. Maybe this would allow a real love group to form. That is how you form a real love group. You don't go out to people and say, okay, we're looking to form a real love group. That would really make people feel uncomfortable on the whole. Whereas if you say to somebody, it's so simple. I mean, somebody's talking about, for example, their stupid husband, their witchy wife, their rebellious child, and you say, well, you know, what I've learned is that when somebody feels unconditionally loved, they behave this way. That when somebody behaves like this, they're not feeling loved. I've learned that you share with them some one principle of real love. Then you shut up and you watch what happens. And if the person that you're talking to says, cool, where'd you learn that? Well, dang, that's an invitation. It's kind of like these days, more and more in business, there is a movement toward what they call preparing customers so that you have customers who want to buy rather than having salesmen who are constantly trying to sell, which is hard work. And people don't like being sold. They don't like being convinced and pushed and manipulated. And same thing with real love. I don't push anybody to do real love ever. But if somebody says, you know, I just hate it that my brother, and I say, you know, my experience is that when people behave like that, here's how they feel. And if the person looks at me like, you have no idea what you're talking about, my brother is just a hopeless jerk, and then they keep on blaming their brother, I'm not going to bother them. I'm not going to tell them anymore. Clearly, they don't want to hear anymore. But if you do what John just said, you know, and he says, well, you know, if you want, you could watch this DVD with me. And so they watched one DVD. You don't say, come on over to my house and let's watch 9 consecutive hours. Then that person says, whoa, that was cool. Can I invite somebody else? Then after you get, you know, 2, 3 people, that's all it takes sometimes, who are interested in learning about becoming more loving, you have a real love group. And then you just say amongst each other, so do you want to meet like on a regular basis and practice doing this? You know, practice becoming more loving. Well, sure. Yeah, why not? Now you've got a group. And that's how complicated it was. It's nothing. And then they invite their friends, and then they invite... there are groups in this country already, now, that consist of 30, 40, 50 people. And that's how they get started. So, yeah, relax. Do what John did. That's very cool. Of course, I didn't finish reading John's message. Let's see. I, of course, said that would be great. Maybe this would allow a real love group to form. We'll see. It's tough not to have expectations about this, but now I understand that desire you speak of. Yeah. No expectations. What if these two people vanish and they don't want to be in a group? So what? You try it with somebody else. Because trying to force somebody to do what you want, it's exhausting, it's annoying to them, and it's not going to work. So relax. Lorelei says, my partner and I often want to point out each other's getting and protecting behaviors. Oh, isn't that an irresistible urge? Sometimes we're loving when we do, but more often we are not. So, what do you suggest? And I suggest you look at pretty sure it's in the marriage book, might be in some other books too, but that you have to answer the 4 questions before you ever point out anybody else's anything. You have to be able to answer the 4 questions. Is this any of my business? Does it really matter? Can I say this with no disappointment, irritation, expectations, agenda, nothing? Can I say this lovingly, in other words? And last, can my partner hear it? Even if I can say it perfectly, if my partner can't hear it, then I still get to shut up. So, if there really kind of pretty much has to be an agreement. If my partner doesn't want to hear something, my tendency has been for most of my life that I could say something to somebody if it was true, which is absolute garbage. That is not enough reason to tell somebody something. Or if they really needed to hear it. And of course, the ultimate judge in the universe as to whether or not somebody needed to hear it was, coincidentally, me. So that is not enough. Even if those 2 things are true, even if what you're about to say is true, even if the thing you're about to say does need to be heard by the other person, if it ain't your business, if it doesn't matter, and if you can't say it lovingly, and if the other person can't hear it in a loving way, why speak? If they can't hear you and feel loved, nothing good is going to happen. So if you keep speaking, who's the stupid person? You. Or me in many cases. But that's how you figure it out. That's how you figure out whether to speak. Haley, one thought that might work. For those who have a tough time getting to meetings, why not set up a conference call via freeconferencecall.com? Sure. Gather a few folks and go for it. I'd love to be on a call that starts about 10 p.m. Central. Oh, Haley, sweetie, you can set up a conference call, especially if you'll set it up on a weekly basis at a certain time. You can set up a conference call anytime you want. And if you'll make that a regular call, like every, day did you say? 10 p.m. So you didn't say a day. If you pick a day and a time, and then if you'll email Mike here, mike@reallove.com, and ask him to advertise it in the next newsletter, then everybody will know about it. There are probably 10, 11, 12 conference calls going on during any given week. It's a matter of everybody knowing about them and simply going to them. In fact, I'm going to make a note about that, to have Mike see if he advertises the conference calls. But you can set up a conference call anytime you want to. Or you can get advice from Mike about how to set up a conference call. But love to have you set up your own. And then there's some other people who have some great ideas about how to set up conference calls internationally so that they're free. So please do. Set up more and more. Parenting question. My 3-year-old says no to me all the time. You'll discover that if at a very young age you cut their tongues out, they can't do that. Well, probably not the best thing to do. Most people say that your son does not respect you, and you will only teach him to be a spoiled crybaby. See, most people say your son does not. Okay, when he tells me no, most of the time, I ignore him. Sometimes there is a consequence. Sometimes I talk to him about something else in order to redirect him. I see. Do you have any suggestions on stopping this no issue? Okay. I know that toddlers go through this, but any additional advice would help. Okay, I get it. You can't ignore no's. It's very confusing to a child if we allow them to say no sometimes and not other times. What they learn is that the world is absolutely chaotic. So the first suggestion I make to you is be very careful before you tell a child to do something that it's important enough to tell them. So, for example, I was talking to a man over the weekend, and he's one of those people who, and this is a very common parental thing, he's one of those who is always telling his kids what to do. So like at the dinner table, he's all the time saying, don't hold your glass like this, put your fork there. That's not how we eat a cucumber. These are quotes that I'm getting from him and from his wife. That's not how you eat a cucumber. What child is going to grow up remembering that one of the pivotal events in their lives, one of the more important instructions was how to eat a cucumber? Nobody cares. So the first thing, I just can't say this enough, you got to be real careful what you pick to tell your children that they have to do. I was a Boy Scout leader for years and ran a huge group of Boy Scouts. In a really large group of Boy Scouts where there's 30 plus kids as there was in ours, there's very often 5, 6, 7 men, who were Scout leaders. In our Boy Scout group, there was one leader, me. I didn't have any trouble with them ever. I let them act like boys. They were all 14 and 15 years old. I wasn't all the time saying, do this, don't do that. Oh, don't make noise. Don't. If you tell kids what to do all the time, they're going to say no just on principle. They're going to say no just because they feel controlled all the time. They're going to say no just to hear the word no. So we got to be careful to be telling them what to do. So if you're careful about telling them what to do, then you have to be careful that they don't ever get to say no when you tell them what to do, and it's important. So, a couple of principles. First is you love and teach. Love and teach and love and teach. And the most important principle on the planet is the law of choice. So when you tell a child what to do and you give them one choice, there's like this little alarm that goes off inside kids that says, oh, he's trying to control me. I hate that. Which of us as adults likes to be controlled? Nobody does. When somebody comes in the room and says, I'm going to make you whatever, we don't like that. And so whenever possible, give a kid a choice. We're getting ready to, he's given us an example here. It's time to go to preschool. So you say, we're going to go to preschool. You have to be ready in 20 minutes. You can get dressed first and then eat. You can eat and get dressed. Which would you rather do first? Give them choices to make. They love having choices. You'll discover that if you give kids choices, they do 10 times better than if you don't. The other thing is, like, when you say it's time to go to preschool, if you wait till the last minute and you make it a rush, as soon as there's a rush and you put that energy of controlling anger in it, you're screwed, because the kid's going to fight you just because you're angry and you're giving out the "I don't love you" message. So most of the problems with no from a kid are the parent. They're ill-prepared. They don't give their kids choices. And then the other part is, sometimes when the kid says no, the parent gets mad and does something. Other times the parent just does nothing at all. Other times the parent bribes the kid. When a parent, with most kids, when a parent says, "Go do this," the child has no clue whether the parent really means it. See what I'm saying? Because the parent reacts differently every time, which is why you have to be absolutely consistent. So, let's say you got a kid who, the example here is, it's time to go to preschool. And the child says, "No, I don't want to go." Well, you probably haven't done your homework. If you get ready for preschool in a prescribed way, you give them lots of choices about what to dress, you give them choices about what to eat, lots of choices about, by the time you get to preschool, they're already ready. It's all done. But let's say you're already at no. Then you say, "All right, we are going to preschool." So, you still have choices. You can go to preschool wearing your pajamas that are on you now. You're going to look a little silly and people are going to laugh at you, but you can go in your jammies. You can go to preschool wearing, and you'd have to get a ball and cut a little slit in it for this, but wearing a big rubber ball on your nose, that'd be one way to go. You can go to preschool, I could put a chain around your feet and we could drag you behind the car. That would be painful. You could go to preschool all dressed in school clothes. You have quite a number of ways that you can go to school, but you are going to go to school. When you give a child choices, especially when you're lighthearted about it and not controlling, kids don't have a big fit. I mean, we had 7 kids and now have 3 grandkids. I mean, and when I talk to a kid about what we're going to do, they just do. You don't fight them and push them. We're going to go. So I can help get dressed. You can get dressed on your own. I can take your or you can wait till the last second, and then we'll only have time to take your jammies off, and you can go to preschool naked. Gosh, I don't know if they have a school rule about going to school naked, but I guess we could find out. I mean, by this, the kid's laughing. I mean, involve the kid in choices. But one of the choices is not, "I'm not going to preschool." Now, what if he kicks up a big fuss and he says, "No, absolutely no way, I am not going"? Then, you may have to pick the kid up and put the kid in the back of the car and he goes to school in his jammies. Whatever. There has to be a consequence to a child making a bad choice. "I won't get ready for school" means you go like you are. Or you miss breakfast. Or you make the consequence unpleasant enough that the next time they're not going to want to go through that again. So let's say, for example, normally in preschool they take a snack. And you say, "Oh, well, then I guess we're not going to have time to prepare a snack," which they've usually come to enjoy. So then when they get to preschool that day, you go to the teacher and you say, "We didn't have time to prepare a snack because Fred here decided that he wanted to wait to the last minute, and so we didn't have time for one." The next time Fred gets ready for preschool, he's going to remember that he didn't have a snack because he made a fuss. Our problem is that we let our children make irresponsible choices, and then we pay the price. They have to pay the price. And if they pay the price, eventually they make smarter choices. They really do. No joke. Maria says the Tuesday a.m. conference call is usually very well attended. I guess that's a phone conference call. There were about 9 people on it this morning. Cool. It's a great way to start the day. More AM calls could be successful. I agree. I attend most conference calls, and I like them all, but I've noticed that the Tuesday AM call is consistently well attended because, to repeat myself, a great way to start the day. Numbers of us are on mute or speakerphone driving kids to school on the job. Nobody was on the Saturday AM call, and I got Alan Ferguson all to myself. Good person to get all to yourself. I love Alan Ferguson. Last week on Wednesday, although there are usually 3 regulars on that call. So would people consider more weekday AM calls? So what I suggest you do is you must know some more coaches. And so I would suggest that you send out an email to more coaches and that you either set up another morning call on a weekday and then invite people to come, or you ask people to set it up. Don't wait for one to happen. Make it happen, and it will. Parenting question. 11-year-old son has started rolling his eyes at me when he's asked to do simple tasks, like taking his plate to the sink. I've been wanting to tell him that there's going to be a consequence for that behavior. Yet I wonder if that's the right thing to do. Do you recommend a consequence for that? And if so, what would be a good consequence? If not, what do you recommend? You can't make somebody enjoy something. You can't do it. So, as long as he takes his plate to the sink, if he wants to roll his eyes, let him roll his eyes. But you have to teach him. And so, for example, occasionally, like with our kids, you know, I mean, if somebody did something and they were like, they went out to empty the garbage going, and I would say, gosh, let's see now, you could do something and be happy, or you could do something and intentionally make yourself miserable. Let's see, which of those two would be the smart decision? Which would make the other decision the dumb decision, wouldn't it? Hey, if you want to make yourself miserable, go for it. But I'm going to be happy all day long. So if you want to make yourself miserable, go get 'em, kid. The consequence of rolling your eyes and choosing to be miserable, the consequence is the misery itself. You see? So there's no consequence to apply to somebody who's just making himself miserable because he's not doing anything to anybody else. Now, if he starts making little comments and interfering with other people's happiness, then you might talk about a consequence. But you do need to teach them and say, or you just stop them. One thing that's very helpful, the reason that he rolls his eyes, by the way, is to attack you. And so as soon as he rolls his eyes, you stop him and say, okay, when you were 12 months old and you pooped your pants and you made that little grunting sound and went, then I understood from your nonverbal language that you pooped your pants and I needed to do something. But once you got to be, 3 or 4, and where you could use words, then pretty much that became the standard, that you just told me what you wanted, instead of conveying it in these little indirect ways, which I'm just going to share with you. By the way, I'm talking like I was you talking to the child, which, by the way, doesn't bother me, but will really irritate other people for the rest of your life. You try this little rolling the eye trick with your girlfriend, for example, or your wife, or your teacher, and or maybe some kid on the playground. You're going to get your lights punched out. So what I recommend is that you practice telling people what you think. So let's practice now. By the way, they hate it when you catch them on acting like morons. And so you say, so you just rolled your eye at me. Tell me what that means in English. And you just sit and wait. Because, see, victims like to act like, look how you've wounded me. They don't ever like to be in a position where they have to actually explain themselves. Victims hate that. They always want to make it about you. So explain to me, just what does it mean when you roll your eyes? Now this child is put in the horribly uncomfortable position of having to say, I think that it's terribly unfair that in a household where I get clothed, fed, carried, carted, loved, pampered, given everything I want, I would actually have to carry my dishes to the sink. When you require a child to express what rolling the eyes mean, and you show them how utterly ridiculous their complaint is, it doesn't usually keep up much longer. So, does that help? Don't let people get away with these little sidewards comments, or they're going to keep doing them, because it's really an expression of victimhood. Vicky, my ex, has, I love it when people say my ex. I often wonder, my ex what? Ex human being. My ex has decided that giving our 9-year-old daughter her medicine is too much of a pain. I've heard this one before. When she doesn't want to take the medicine, they have a big scene. So my ex said, so just forget it, don't take it. As a result, she has a recurring infection. Gee whiz, unbelievable. I am struggling to not be right when we talk about her health. This is a difficult person to deal with any suggestions. So, what a weakling your ex is. I mean, and this is very common. We don't ever want to hear anything negative from another person, and so we take the weak path. So, what could you do here? I just had a loss of brain function. Oh, the pills. All right, so you can go to your ex, because the kid's got to take the pill. I mean, if the kid's having recurrent infections, come on, the kid could die from this. So you go to your ex and you say, if you go to the ex and say, you know, you really should do a better job of giving Susie her medicine, you're dead, because your ex is going to hear you're a defective moron and you're going to have a fight on your hands. Whereas if you go to your ex in an understanding, loving way and offer to help, things get different. Now, I'm not telling you this is going to work every time, but I can tell you that I have seen this approach work many times. So you go to your ex and you say, now you're talking about your daughter now. You say, Susie can be a real pill about taking her, so to speak, pun not intended. Susie can be a real pill about taking her medicine, can't she? Well, your ex is going to be all over this because that's how she feels. Yeah, she really can. In one sentence, you suddenly became allies. See this? You're on the same team. So you say, she can be a real stinker, and I just hate dealing with her when she doesn't want to take her medicine. Don't you? Well, you already know the answer to this question, right? I mean, you're taking her down the garden path, so to speak. And so your ex says, yeah, I hate it too. And so you say, what could we do together to help make this happen? I mean, I know how much you hate it, so let's see. What if we did this? Let's see. She has to take her medicine, let's say it's twice a day. I don't know what the answer is, but let's say it's twice. So you say to your partner, how about if you do that? How about if you require that she takes the medicine in the morning before school, and I'll be responsible for her taking it at night. Now, on the days that she's with you, that's easy. But on the days she's with your partner, so what you say to your partner is, so would it be all right with you if at 7 o'clock